Well, hi everyone. Hope everybody is having a great starting of week, and I hope that this presentation that's coming up is going to contribute to that. So today we're here to talk about Rovio and how we're approaching growth through player-centric user acquisition creative design. So let me start maybe by a quick introduction of myself in the context of Rovio. So started back in September 2019 as a director of growth. Since then, I've been very involved in the topic of optimizing creative approaches, and that's why I'm picking up that topic today. And rather than trying to explain all the details about Rovio and its organization, I'd rather focus on the organization through the prism of creative testing specifically. So as I just said, that's a very big topic for us at Rovio that involves the collaboration of a lot of different teams, which are all leveraging a variety of skill sets from the most qualitative insights with user research and market research to the kind of analytics that you get to see once you have campaigns live. So as director of growth, I'm leading a team of product marketers, user researchers, and since recently a creative director for ads. So that's the team that you can see on the left. When it comes to creative specifically, my teams are involved from the very early stages, even before we have actual games, to make sure that the games that we're starting on are the most marketable as possible. So we leverage insight from all sources to test approaches through user acquisition with a big focus on exploration and product positioning itself. To the right, you can see that we also have a user acquisition team that works very closely with the growth team, and that takes over once the games are live in a logic of return on investments. So they start from the insight that was collected by the growth team and keep on testing, well, until the end of time to find new best performing creatives. Just a quick word on the spirit of the presentation itself, because just as any other publishers or advertiser out there, we're just learning as we go. So as a company, we've decided to invest a lot in learning how to produce better creatives, but our approach is just one of the possible avenues in regard to the topic, obviously. We're still learning, but we feel that there is value in the overall strategy that we've been focusing on and that we're implementing, and in the principles that will be discussed during this presentation. We don't have the truth, or maybe we have just one truth, but we do have encouraging signals that what we're doing is right. So let's maybe start first looking at the challenge itself. I think everybody here has heard that in the recent month, but creative is king in a world that's rapidly moving towards automated media buying. And we strongly believe that optimizing creative is now hands down the most effective way to drive return on ad spend. Some could even argue that creative is the new targeting. So that brings pretty significant challenges. First of all, the creative factory is always at full speeds. Literally thousands of creatives are being produced each year, with only a handful of them taking a vast majority of the spend. That also involves a lot of constant A/B testing. So whether you do that in-house or if you work with a network of vendors, just like we do, that requires a huge amount of time spent on briefing, processing, and analyzing the performance of these creatives when they are A/B tested. Some shortcuts do exist. Here is an example of a video, of a couple of videos to the right that we created for, on one side, Angry Birds Dream Blast, on the other side, Sugar Blast, that do draw inspiration from one of the top competitors, and they both worked very well. That being said, expecting this strategy to always work is really, well, wishful thinking. We're not saying that this approach is entirely wrong, it's just not sustainable. And first and foremost, it doesn't always work or lay the foundation of a long-term creative strategy. And finally, maybe, and that's the most important point here, it severely limits the innovation and creativity and your ability to lead more than to follow. That brings us to the million-dollar question, which is how to improve the odds of finding new hero creatives and be able to scale up. So whether you decide to get inspired from others or coming up with new concepts, how can you guarantee that your dollar spent in creatives will yield the best possible results? how do you actually rationalize your approach to creative ideation and come up with data insights or insight-based hypotheses to test? The question is very simple, though it's not. Ask yourself, wait, but why? Why does a creative work, whether it's an adaptation from competition or an entirely new concept? One of the obvious benefits of the industry that we work in is that it's possible to experiment and test a lot of different things quickly and easily, but while it's easy, it just provides the answer to what works, but you don't get to know why it's working. So if you don't get to understand the underlying mental principles that do drive design effectiveness, then A/B testing is just a trial and error process. The missing puzzle piece is to understand the hidden mental processes in the mind that are driving people to click, and this is what we're trying very much to decipher. So let's look quickly at human brains. I'm starting here with neurodesign, as its principles apply to all humankind, and any approach should probably leverage its insights. So what can psychology and neuroscience tell us about what is really driving where we look within the news feeds or just generally when looking at visuals? Neurodesign draws on other fields such as psychology and other kind of sciences to help understand why people react in the way they do to designs. So as neuroscience and psychology research have accumulated a lot of information over recent decades, they probably have a lot of things to say about the common factors that influence whether people will like or not a design. So this research has really increased in the recent years, including the founding of a very specialized field, which is neuroaesthetics, which specifically studies the factors that influence whether our brains respond positively to images. You've probably also heard about the System 1 and System 2. These are two systems that do not refer so much to parts of the brains as much as processes that the brain use. And these terms were coined by the Nobel Prize and Daniel Kahneman. So System 1, that's the one that we're going to be interested in. It's the oldest system, approximately 600 million years. It works on the basics of intuition, emotions, habits, prejudices, and what we call heuristics. It does function outside consciousness and in a completely automatic and manner, processing huge amounts of information while needing seemingly no efforts, all without the feeling of voluntary control. Then System 2 is relatively new. It's a conscious, rational, systematic, and logical system, which is not necessarily what we're going to look at today. So in a nutshell, we're intuitive, impatient, and image-focused. While we evolved to decode information from our eyes, and the volume and variety of artificial images and designs is always increasing. There is more trust to us than ever before. If we're slightly bored or just dissatisfied with something, we can just click away, and research has demonstrated several times that people don't read things thoroughly online, they just glance and dip. So just a quick anecdote. Some research has demonstrated, there was research from Microsoft with 2,000 people in Canada. It showed that our ability to sustain focused attention in the face of distraction has dropped to 8 seconds in 2015 as compared to 12 in 2000, which is reported as not being much better than the focusing abilities of a goldfish. So let's look at a few principles to maybe help human brains just figure out what they should be liking and what they shouldn't. Emotion leads to motion. Functional magnetic resonance imaging, sorry for that, shows that when evaluating brands, consumers primarily use emotions, personal feelings, experiences, rather than information such as attributes, features, and facts. And a lot of research has demonstrated that consumers' emotional response to an ad has a far greater influence on their reporting intent to buy a product than does the actual ad's content, by a factor of roughly 3 to 1. So how do you bring people to feel things about what they're seeing and to have actual emotions? characters are one way to make that happen. They really elicit, a very strong subconscious response. So whenever possible, just use characters to advance the story or the narrative. In our case at Rovio, we're lucky enough to have a lot of characters, and they are very often used as one of the key differentiators when placed alongside competition. Another lever is fear. So as a matter of fact, we run from fear faster than we run to pleasure. So it's the most powerful emotion that you can experience as human beings. It's the root driver behind most of the decisions we make, even when the intended outcome is positive. You need to be mindful of fear for obvious reasons, because it's such a powerful level that you can pull to create emotional moments. And fear of losing, if you look at this example, can be felt in this video that we saw before, where in the last seconds, we show to the viewers that they are about to fail. Pay attention to that and try to see how you feel about that kind of videos yourself. Then first and last impressions matter. Beginning and end of a video are the most impactful, and they need to also be somewhat related. So capitalize on the first 3 to 7 seconds of the ad by appealing to emotion, so that you psychologically prime the user to stay engaged throughout the entire ad. Then in the middle, you can break it with new moves, like showing increasing difficulty, bringing a little bit of variations, and also encouraging users. And in the end, conclude with something that, again, relates to the introduction, because our minds are brain for stories. Our brains are wired for stories. Then contrast helps with the saliency. As obvious as it might sound, it's something that maybe we don't think of as often as we do, because contrast between an object and its surrounding makes it salient. So in this example that you're seeing, we remove the background from the actual game so that it would be white, and so that viewers would be able to see what actually matters here, which is the puzzle mechanics. So just keep in mind that color and contrast are some of the 2 most important factors in producing that very saliency, and that's even more true in the context of mobile, where you can't really control some variables such as lighting or brightness. So in a nutshell, if you want somebody to see something, make it stand out. Then again, that might sound obvious, but words do get the message across when they are used carefully. Visual cues help take the user on a journey by telling them what they need to know. So be mindful of that and help your viewers just figure out what's the key taking from what they are watching. So moving away from very general principles, since it's the kind of approaches that we've been leading quite thoroughly at Rovio, we have some very specific learnings that we can show here. The first fact that we always need to keep in mind as advertisers is that humans are much more than numbers. We want to acknowledge humans in all their complexity rather than just look at data, because, I mean, we've collected so much data. So why does it seem harder and harder to always create like new marketing campaigns that perform? It's simply because the demographic and behavioral data we currently use to analyze players is not indicative of who the players actually are, or what they need to feel involved, understood. In other words, we're much more than our behavior, and we're so much more than demographic information. So yes, of course, user analytics are an essential component of a successful marketing campaign, but we feel like it's the bare minimum. So how can you look at your players using that kind of insight and looking at what actually motivates them as compared to just demographic figures? Player archetypes is one way to look at it. So I'll go through them later, but just let's acknowledge that several models exist, from the self-determination theory to the player experience of need satisfaction model. But no matter how you look at it, you can cluster people based on what they look for when they engage with game. And having a clear understanding of the motivation set of your most valuable players is going to be key. So if we look at these very archetypes that I've got in front of me, they are all involved in playing casual puzzle games, but they are looking for different kind of experiences. So we have the achiever on the left, who just want to master new skills and progress through a very clear goal. What they want is to complete as many levels as they can, collect all the everything that can be collected. They want to use their brain in a strategic manner, and they want to get challenges. Then we have the solver who gets more satisfaction in the feeling that he's actually using his or her brain in solving puzzles. It's not really the accomplishment itself that matters, but more how they feel that they're, well, using their brains. And then you've got the escapist, who's more interested in the, well, plots, the fantasy, the characters, and was looking for immersion. So if we look at our own games, and that's going to be maybe even more interesting for you, let's look at Dream Blast. So Dream Blast is a casual puzzle game that's based on the Angry Birds franchise, and that's focusing very much on the core gameplay itself with a very light meta. So the data that you're seeing has been collected through surveys in our game that we match against the behavior that we're tracking. And in this example, you can see that Dream Blast players are very much into strategy and completion, to look back to what we said before. And if you compare them to players who are playing Smoke on Mirrors, which is also a casual puzzle game, match 3 core gameplay, but with a very strong narrative layer, you can see that the motivation to get immersed in the story is much higher. So you really need to acknowledge that because it's going to be, well, changing a lot of things that you do in regards to the product itself and the way you advertise it. So if we say that, what does it mean for the creatives themselves? Just a quick couple of examples. So Smoke on Mirrors, as you can see, puzzle game, but a lot of focus in the storytelling, in the universe that we build for the game, and in the fantasy, which is to solve crime, as compared to focusing very much on the core gameplay. Entirely different stories for Dream Blast, where obviously that's the core gameplay that matters the most, because you also want to make sure that the creative messaging itself is aligned with the game experience, because if you don't go for that, then that means that your in-game KPIs are going to suffer. Then even within the same game, you can find all sorts of players. Looping back to the archetypes that we had before, even in Smoke on Mirrors, you've got content for the achiever, so focusing on collecting all the clues and solving the puzzles. Then you've got the solver, who most likely is going to be interested in finding out who the murderer is. And finally, you've got the escapist, where you're going to focus very much on the characters and the story itself. So even for the same game, you can try different approaches to cater to various player archetypes. And you need to ensure that the game experience does deliver on these motivations when you look for players that retain. So looking forward, as I said before, that's a topic that's still very much in motion. We're learning as we go, but we've got a few avenues that we've already started investigating, and there you go with them. So audience segmentation 2.0. We recently started working with an external partner, 12 Traits, you might have heard of them, to go deeper in the understanding of our players and their psychology. Because understanding who the players are, what motivates them, and especially intrinsically, what they value, how they communicate, is going to be extremely useful to supercharge your creativity. So when working with them, we're marrying the old style, tracking behavior, with the new style, which is to look at psychology, to build site-based personality personas and understand the fullness of who they are. So we just started with that. It's already been quite enlightening in a few areas, and we're waiting to get more out of it. And then automated creative performance analysis, which is another avenue we're exploring. And which we think is going to give us the ability to recognize what in a video is bringing the performance. So could be the character, could be the very character expression, could be the kind of gameplay that you're showcasing, or could even be the text. So as you tag this, we should be able, hopefully in the longer run, to get, first of all, the ability to understand which approaches have, historically speaking, been the most efficient, and on the other side, provide new creative ideas. So thank you for your attention. I hope that was useful, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any question or if you want to discuss something specifically.
Wow, that was amazing. Can I just say that was possibly one of the most beautiful presentations I've seen, and also, who knew that advertising was so complicated? um, like I was just
Thank you
thinking,
very much
wow,
for that.
we've just done a picture of a bird, and then a different color. But my God, that was I don't know if I'm naive, but that was, I obviously thought more went into it than that, but I didn't realize the psychology of advertising was quite so deep. So that was yeah, very very impressive, and definitely hopefully it was giving me plenty to think about. Hopefully it's given a few of our audience a few things to think differently as well about that. I've got a couple of questions, but we seem to have a chunk in here as well, so I'm gonna fire in if that's okay. First one up is, what type of ad creative themes do you find most effective for high ROAS, Rose? New versus pro, fail, etc. That's very specific, I guess.
That's a very specific question, and I would be kind of contradicting myself if I gave you like a canned answer to that. It really depends on what the kind of experience that your game is providing. Depends on who your players are. So I'd rather stay away of providing a predefined answer to that. But some principles are working. Like I mean, if you just look at App Annie, you can see for a fact all other like platforms, you can see that a lot of schemes and approaches are always working, but I cannot identify one single winner.
No, well, obviously that's why there's so many different types of ad. If one thing worked, we'd all be bombarded with that, and then it wouldn't work, I guess. So that's the joy of it. That's why you've got to keep poking away at the brain. So another quick question. So feel free to back these away if they're not. Did you try to apply these concepts in static, GIF, or HTML5 ad formats?
We haven't to date. It's not something that we've done extensively now.
Fair enough. Good answer. Good quick answer. Here's the same question has been kind of asked sort of twice. So I'm just going to mute that. So many messaging windows, and they all seem to harass you all the time. So it's the same kind of question for us, I guess. Is how much of this you've outlined some quite elaborate theories and ideas, but obviously at the end of the day, results drive what you do, I guess. So how much, what's the sort of balance between innovative thinking and the theory and just results? What works?
To be honest, it's really impactful. And I guess the work specifically, like the principles that I've mentioned first about like how human brain works, you can, like, we know for a fact, and this is science backed, that it's working better. These are principles that you should always have in mind. And then in regards to like game specific approaches, our experience, and I can't really comment on the KPIs that we're having, but it's been proving extremely impactful. Like, we're seeing that since we shifted from kind of like, let's try everything out that we're seeing from the computers, to let's be focused on what the players are trying to get out of the game experience, results have been much better. For example, I said in the first slides that a huge part of the spend goes to the same creatives. And since we've started applying these principles, we can see that the number of creatives among which we split the spend is much higher, which is saying that we've got more than one winners. And that's a very positive signal.
No, that's great. I've got a question here about the role of background music or sound effects in ad creative. Obviously, that's something you can't always legislate is going to be there. In Angry Birds, very famous.
It helps. So we know for a fact that not that many people are listening to sound while watching ads, but if you do that properly, and that was too long a topic to be added to this presentation for 20 minutes, but it's also something that definitely is going to amplify the impact of your creatives if that's done correctly. Okay.
There's loads of other stuff in here. God, you're one of the most popular. So that's what the shows that happens when you put the death in. Oliver Kern says, great presentation. Do you test different creatives for different channels and different markets, nevertheless?
Yes, we do. Like, if I'm saying that you need to make sure that the creatives that we're using are, well, designed specifically for a specific audience, then that also means that you need to be mindful of that when running different campaigns using different creatives. So we're also mindful of the differences when it comes to like cultural habits. So we also try to make sure that whatever we push in specific geos is also adapted to them and to the channels that they're using.
Okay. There's a couple of questions here about sort of advisors, I guess. One is, what is the name of the behavioral search partner that you work with? And another is, whom do you hire for creative production? A neurologist, psychologist, or someone else? So I guess they're talking about what advice you're taking externally, not personally, but for the advertising.
So the company that I mentioned before is called 12 Traits. Traits referring to the psychological traits, and they have 12 of them. And then the creative director that we're working with has a huge background in neuromarketing in the context of mobile advertising.
Cool. I'm going to keep them going for a little while. We've got a couple of minutes left, so don't worry, you'll get a break in a minute. There's a question about your thoughts on misleading ads. I think that's a topic that was being raised in different places, where the ad is just nothing to do with the game, and it looks like it's some sort of point and click adventure, and then you turn around and it's some RPG that doesn't feature in. Do you think that's a problem?
That brings several questions. So first of all, figuring out why they work, because they must work. If they've been online for such a long time, it means that the players that they are bringing to games is, well, they are good enough for them to justify keeping on investing on that kind of creatives. So we don't know yet why it's working so well. But as a publisher, and when it comes to the ethical question of misleading advertising, I think that's, first of all, they are not all equal, but I think it's fair to say that some of them are selling fantasy. And across a lot of industries, it's something that people do. Like think about perfume. I guess that's one great example where you don't actually show the products, but the fantasy that goes with it. And then I guess, I mean, we're working in the free-to-play industry, so the worst that can happen at user level is that they lose 2 minutes of their time downloading something for free. Sure, it's not a great experience. Some could argue that your brand is going to suffer from that, even though we don't have yet KPIs to actually prove it. So I would say if that works, there is probably a good reason, and I don't see that as being unethical.
No, fair enough. Okay, I've got a couple of questions on archetypes here. One is, do you aim to target all the archetypes with your games? And the other is, do you design ad creatives and try to target players based on archetypes? Is it even possible in any ad networks to target in that way?
So the first question is, yes, we do. And we try to link the performance of the players that we bring in through a specific creative approach to the archetype that we used, which is the end goal would be to say, for example, that the escapists, they are the most valuable players that we can get in. So that should be the approach. So yes, we do link the actual track performance with the creative approach and the archetype. And the second question was what? Sorry, can you?
I think it was kind of, how can you target that through ad networks? Is there a way of targeting archetypes through any networks?
It's tricky. You could think of that by adapting your creative strategy to the kind of games where you're advertising. So I'll use a very random example, but say if you're advertising in a, I don't know, words game, then maybe some could argue that you would go for the strategist. Probably a very bad example, but that's the first that comes to my mind. So we don't do it yet. We're looking at it, but we haven't found very scalable ways to do it.
Yeah, okay. I'll try and get through two more because there was so many questions. I just want to try and get as much of them out. Anonymous one. You mentioned about running from fear instead of running to pleasure, kind of fear of losing. Do you think there would be an opportunity to create FOMO for gamers in any open-ended games? And do you think that would be effective?
That would probably be effective, but going back to the topic of being ethical, I'm not sure that's the way to go. I don't think we would like to bring players because they're afraid of missing something. It's a strategy that's been largely used by a lot of publishers, and that we're starting as an industry to walk away from, and I think that's a great thing.
Fair enough. My son plays a lot of Fortnite. There's a lot of FOMO, and constantly missing out on various things in that. No offense to Epic, of course, it's a very good game. And then storytelling versus psychological tricks. Ooh, which one do you think is more effective strategy? Psychological, well. psychology.
They should go hand in hand, and storytelling just goes well in specific contexts, because you need to have a product that supports storytelling. So for example, for Dream Blast that I've mentioned before, we don't really do that. For Small Town Murders, of course we'll do it, because the game itself has a very strong narrative layer. So start from the product, start from the audience, and figure out what makes the most sense.
Fantastic. And I'll go one final question, because Argeris, who I've pronounced his name wrong, is asks, knowing what you know now, would your current approach to UA work 5 years ago, or is this more because the audience has matured? I guess you won't, it's very hard to apply something now to 5 years ago, but do you think
I wish I had known all of that 5 years ago, because we would have been in an even better spot back then. So now it's needed. Back then it would have been like a tremendous competitive advantage.
Okay.
It still is, but well, more players are adopting that view as well.
Final one that just crept in, so I'll ask it because it seems quite short. Any suggestions, examples for capturing attention in the first few seconds or the last few seconds? I presume that means
yeah, characters. Like depends again on the kind of game that you're advertising. But if you have characters starting with a very strong expression, is going to set the tone for everything, and you're definitely going to catch your viewers' attention.
Cool. All right, that's brilliant. You answered incredibly succinctly and very good. There's a fascinating story in you yourself, Kieran, because you have what appears to be an Irish name, a French accent, and you live in Helsinki.
Yeah, well, I'm half Irish, but yeah, I've got a French accent I need to live with.
It's fun. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a fascinating story. So we have to discuss over a beer. But thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Generous bit today, and hopefully see you in over in Helsinki soon.